This meeting is being recorded.
So we are all so informed, right? Ralph, I have right at 9 o'clock, and I do have some folks that are still coming in, but I know that everyone's time is precious. So I'll let you go ahead and welcome us. And then if you would be so kind to introduce Amy, and we'll go from there. I'm going to double check that the screen share is set up for everyone. All right. Thanks, Ralph. You are muted, Ralph.
Do I need to share my screen?
You can if you wish.
It's not important. Hi, everybody. It's my privilege to welcome you all to the 8th annual School Counselor Summit. And Nan, when I saw that, I couldn't believe that this the 8th one. Geez, I don't know where the time goes, but we started out doing these in person, and last couple of years we've been doing them virtually. And you know, there are advantages to both. So we'll talk about over the year with our Income, Education, and Workforce Development Committee how we want to do it next year. But one of the nice things I've found about virtual is you get more participation because it doesn't cut into people's days so much, but I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir. Anyhow, I want to welcome you all. I'm Ralph Sinistro, manager of the Ohio Means Job Center at 1040 East Talmadge Avenue in Akron. And if you haven't been here, I invite you to come and visit. We have, you know, we're part of the American Job Center Network. There are hundreds of these types of centers around the country. There are, I think, 90 in Ohio. And I always like to tell people who might not be familiar that this isn't just some random grouping of organizations. This is a national, this is law. This is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act that mandates that we have these centers. And, you know, I'm not going to go, you know, drill down deep on that, but we have one of the best. I've been to centers throughout Ohio and around the country. We're very fortunate here. We have a unique feature is our drop-in daycare center, where if you're here and you're using the center, you can to go to the resource room, to go to a workshop or meet with a counselor. You can leave the kids in the fun stop, we call it, drop-in daycare center, which is operated by the YMCA. So we're very lucky here in Summit County. I encourage you to check it out. I hope you school counselors will share all this great information today with the students and families. And, you know, we are here at the Job Center. We're the local all-in-one workforce resource center, providing a full range of free services to job seekers and businesses. And we're going to be learning about the features of our statewide website called ohiomeansjobs.com today. And I'm excited because there might be some new features that I don't even know about yet. But I also, before I hand it over to Amy, and I'll introduce Amy, I want to encourage all of you to look at our local website, which is summitmedinaomj.org, and I'll put that in the chat box. But it tells you all about all the services that we provide here. And so please explore our local website too. And we're part of the Summit and Medina workforce area. So thanks to Nan for all your hard work, Nan. And it's, you know, this has been a great project. I'm really happy to be part of. And to all of you counselors, and also thanks to Amy Dumbaugh from the state of Ohio Department of Job and Family Services in Columbus. And thanks, Amy. Please thank Greg Warren, who some of you will remember. Greg has been the presenter on the ohiomeansjobs.com presentation over the years, but Amy's doing it this year. I'm sure she'll do a great job. Really appreciate your time, Amy, and I'm looking forward to your presentation. And with that, Nan, that ought to do it. Have a great
Thank
Friday.
you, Ralph. Thank you, Ralph. Appreciate your leadership in our community and in our committee. And Amy, we thank you also for making time for us, and I'll let you unmute and you should be able to share your screen.
Great, thank you so much. Like Ralph and Nan said, my name is Amy Dumbaugh. I'm a project manager with the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. My kind of area of expertise is anything with education. So higher education and education. I work very closely with both of those. And Greg's kind enough to sometimes take over and help out with some presentations for me when I can't do them. So I really appreciate him doing this for you in the past. So I'll go ahead and get started, and I'll try to share my screen. Hopefully this works. And nope. Okay. Can you see my screen or not?
I am not able to see yours. Laura, for some reason, we're there. I can see an OMJ screen.
You can't see OMJ screen? Okay, great. Okay.
We can't see it.
So as many of you know, the Ohio, you can see it? Just double checking. Okay. Okay, so Ohio Meets Jobs has gone through several changes over the years. We always are trying to improve it and put in information that is necessary for students, for job seekers, for employers. It really does have a lot of useful information in it. Today I'm going to take you through the student side, just to show you some features. There is a difference between the K-12 student side and the adult or core side, so job seeker side versus student side. There are two ways to log in. So if you pop onto Ohio Meets Jobs at first, you'll go into the adult side of Ohio Meets Jobs. To get to the student side, you have to click for students, and you can just go to the student home. And let's hopefully see if this works for me. And once you do that, that's kind of the student side. So then when you click on my profile to create an account, that's going to take you to the student side. So it's going to have student information on it and student questions. So when you're logging in to Ohio Meets Jobs as a student, you can register here if they're new. If you're working with students, one thing I tend to recommend to educators is come up with a system for the passwords so that students can remember them. So if you have a mascot, use the mascot and their student number and their favorite character, or pick a character and stick with that. That way, when they say they forget it, as happens to everybody, you can have a system of how they can get their password back and how they can remember it. So I do recommend that to educators and students working with students. Pretty much everything is laid out as you would for most accounts and job seeking websites. The one feature that we do have, it does ask for students, are you a K-12 student? If you don't see that, then you're on the adult side. So that's an easy, quick way to figure out which side you're on. If you say yes, then there's two questions asking if they're 13 years or older. And if you hit yes, you can say, this could say that they're enrolled in the school. And once they start typing in their school, it should pre-populate with some different options for them so they can try to find their school. If their school is not listed, they can put this checkbox and let us know, because we tried to make sure that all the schools are in here. If you are a counselor and you just want to kind of have a fake account to see what the students see, we typically recommend using this ZZZ school. There's just a whole bunch of Z's, and it's ODE test school. And what that is it's a fake kind of school where we can keep all of So you can do all kinds of different things in Ohio Meets Jobs, and just the information comes to like me so that I can see because we do have a teacher's portion, a counselor portion of Ohio Meets Jobs. It's a kind of a different website, and that's where that information goes to. So when I do demonstrations, I can pull that school up and demonstrate what it looks like on the administrative tool for teachers and counselors and administrators. So we do recommend putting in that test school if you're going to create an account, to just show students what you're doing when you're working. Do you want to allow your teacher to view your profile? Students can, so like I said, there's a separate side of Ohio Meets Jobs that is for teachers and counselors and administrators to get kind of what students are doing in their backpack, or I'm sorry, profile now. I'm going to mess that up. So they can give you permission to see what they're doing in their profile. So you can see any, tests that they've taken, any assessments that they've taken. You can see what their results were for the career cluster inventory, and different things like that. So that's a very useful portion of this as well. And then basically everything else on the student side is the same as the adult side. So you'll see a lot of similarities. I'm going to go and actually log in with a different account now that I kind of walked through that. And I'm going to go to my Student 22 email. And the profiles are set up the same. So if you're on the adult side or the student side, they're set up the exact same way. The one difference for students is that the teachers, as you can see right here, my account allows my teacher to see it. So that's what that little green person up there means. And then the only other thing that's different on their account is the career cluster inventory. So that's an assessment. If you haven't seen it before, it's just an interest assessment, and you can retake it. They can view the results, they can take it. I kind of like this. It goes a little quicker in presentations than doing it myself right then. But you can always retake the assessment. And once you do that, it asks you different things like, do you like to go fishing? Do you like to act in a school play? And then the student can say basically if they like or dislike it. If they don't know what it is, they can put not sure. Or if they really like to do something, they can kind of gauge it that way. So this is kind of an interesting assessment that they can go through. There's 80 questions. It doesn't take that long, maybe about 20 minutes to take this assessment. And once they're done with this assessment, they get their results in the career clusters. So that's how it's broken out, and that's how they can start looking at occupations in the career cluster that matches for them. And their results will come up like this. My first top one was government and public administration, and then arts and communication. So once you click, they can click on these links to the career cluster, which will take them to our dynamic career pathways tool. And this is one of my favorite tools on the site. It gives you some information about that career cluster, but then it breaks it down. And this is new, and I don't know if anybody has seen this yet. This has only been out and available for like maybe a month now. So this is all of the occupations that are in this career cluster, and what some of this, like the coloring and different things like that. There's a chart here that you can pull up if you want to see. Like it says, occupations are organized by color and career level within each career cluster. So you can kind of get a different idea of what those means, what the dotted line means, what the solid line means, those types of things. So this is kind of a nice tool to see and use for students. So they can go in here, and if they want to learn more, they can learn more about that occupation, which will take them to our career, what we call a one-sheeter. I think if it does that for me. Okay, and then the one-sheeter provides related occupations for that relates to that occupation. It provides them work activities, skills, work keys scores that are associated with this occupation. So if you're a school that uses work keys, this is something that might be useful to you. career videos it has on here. I do also, for students especially, I do like to point out, the reason why I point this out, it's not something that a lot of people point out, but I point it out to students especially because students sometimes think money, or they think something that's popular. But if they, in this one, if they wanted to be an appraiser or assessor of real estate, they have to have attention to detail. If you're a big picture person, then attention to detail might be a little bit harder for you. So that's kind of something to think about. In the IT realm, you know, students pick IT just because of the money or whatever. But if they're a people person, if they draw their energy from other people, then sitting behind a desk is probably not going to be where they're going to succeed, really. So that's why I do point out the personality section on here. This page also does connect to our school finder, so they can search for 2 and 4 year schools that match this occupation. They can connect to jobs that are matching this occupation. They can create their own career plan around this occupation. So if it's something that they really want to do, they can create a whole plan based on this occupation and how they're going to get to that occupation. And then also they can go back and search their career pathways, which is where we were when it had all those little boxes and arrows. So that's kind of helpful as well. Taking a minute. So when they go back here, they can come back and they can save occupations to their profile. And then once they save these occupations, it'll be in their profile for future. So they can kind of see that, hey, oh, okay, this occupation will get me these skills, this occupation will get me these skills to get here, you know, and they can start making that kind of career path for themselves, and start in entry level and go through expert if they want to. So this is an updated tool, so we're really excited about it. And I always go back to the profile because all of the tools in Ohio Meets Jobs are in the profile. And so that's a really quick and easy way to find anything that you're trying to do in Ohio Meets Jobs. Especially with students, you want to keep them in one place to kind of give them that extra, like, hey, you only have to go to this one place to find what you need. Get back to what you need to do. I am going to turn off my camera because I think that might help my speed here because it is not responding. So we're going back to the profile. And then, like I said, the profile is exactly the same as the adult or core side of Ohio Meets Jobs. So once we can get back there, if we can. It's going to take a minute. Oh, there we go. So then you can go back through the profile, I'm sorry. And then here's the career plan. So if a student wanted to create a career plan, they can create up to 5. You do have to have it associated with an industry or occupation, but it is in there to kind of help students kind of think through that. What do I need to do? So here, I'm just going to go ahead and use middle school teachers and create a career plan for that. And then what it does is it recommends different items or different things to do in Ohio Meets Jobs, and some of them are outside of Ohio Meets Jobs. And it puts a little check mark. If the student's already done it, then it'll say it's done, and you can see the little results right there, and you can review them from this profile. But you kind of keep going back through, and if you want to add something, you can add something and then save and continue. And then we have it set up as exploring, planning, funding, and finding. So kind of steps them through that whole process of exploring an occupation, planning for how they want to get to that occupation, how they're going to fund it, and then how are they going to find it. So obviously this one is planning. So choosing high school classes, getting skills, using the school finder, different things like that to make this career plan. And once they're done, they hit save and continue and move on to the next section of how they're going to pay for it. So I'm sorry? Did someone have a question? So once they get all of this done, they hit save and continue. And then the last one is finding it. So searching for a job, doing a resume, cover letter, that kind of thing. And then once you hit save and continue, this lists everything that you check marked. So when you're working with students, you can create deadlines, and you could say, hey, I want you to research this occupation. I want it to be due, by Tuesday. And you can actually have them, as you're working through this, have them go ahead and put these dates in there. If there are any notes that you would like them to do or put in with this task, you can do that and then save it. And then it'll pull up the next one that you need to put a deadline date in. So you can do this with all of them, or you can do this with some of them. You don't have to put deadline dates for any of them, but if you want to, this is a good way to keep some students on track. And then another thing that's really useful in this is you can add other activities. So if you have an activity that you want students to do, you can customize the activity to whatever that is. So if you have students that are doing, work-based learning, or they have an internship, you can actually have them track that in this system. So you could just say internship, and then you could say 4 hours, and then you could put the due date of whenever they're doing that internship, and say they're doing that internship on the 14th. And then once the 14th comes and they've done it, then they can come in and complete it and mark the completion date. So then you can just save that to the list of things that you have on their calendar. And their calendar, once you're done with this, you can finish it and it'll take them back to their profile. And then it's going to update this calendar right here, and you'll see all the activities that the students got scheduled. So I don't know if everybody has seen this piece of Ohio Meets Jobs. This is one of my favorite pieces, is the assessment and training section. If you have not seen it or have not used it, you should really get in there, because it has so much information and so many tools for students to use to brush up their skills or become proficient in whatever area that they're kind of shaky on. This is one of my favorite things to use on Ohio Meets Jobs, because there are just thousands of assessments, tests, tutorials, anything that somebody would need to get prepared for something. On Ohio Meets Jobs, we have the WorkKeys practice tests. We do have tests. We have more than one test. These are just what's featured. But once you take the first test, it'll suggest taking the second test. So, and you can always go up to this find tests and tutorials up here and put in WorkKeys, and it'll pop up with the different versions of the test. So that's a really good way for someone to understand if they're going to, if you're using the WorkKeys, that's a good thing to use to practice for it. We do also have college test prep. So ACT, SAT, AP classes. They're all in here. All of the practice tests are set up the same way, which I love. So if you go into the ACT math practice test, like I said, all of the tests are set up the same way. If you start a test, there are 3 different ways that you can take a test in Ohio Meets Jobs. There is practice, there is I could be wrong. Simulation, I'm not sure of the order, simulation, practice, and learner mode. So when you take a test, and this is for all of the tests that are on Ohio Meets Jobs, there's a simulation, which simulates the actual test. So if it's a 60-minute test, it will cut the student off at 60 minutes. If you're doing practice, obviously there's no timer, so they can take it kind of when they need to, or how they're, kind of when they have time. They can always come back. It'll save where they're at if they save it, and they can go back to it at any time. The learner mode is my favorite, just because a lot of times, especially with tests, I feel like there's a lot of anxiety and different things like that. So these tests are really good, because once you read the question and you answer it, you can check your answer on the learner mode anytime. The other 2 ways to take it, they do not have this, but on the learner mode, it will tell you the correct answer is C, and it'll tell you why you got your answer wrong. Because usually, especially with, well, anybody really, there's always a little mistake that you make. And this is kind of letting you know, oh, this is what you did wrong in this situation, to get you back to kind of learning how to do it correctly. So I really love this mode, and you can do that on every question in the learner mode. So they can finish this later, they can save it and finish it later, they can score the test and at any time. So this is something that I think is really, really beneficial to students, especially when they're trying those practice tests and different things like that. Another area that I really love is, I'm going to close without saving. That would give me a bad score if I scored that right now. So we're not going to do that. So the other thing on here, another section on here is there's a career area, and I'm not sure why it's not taking me that. Let's go here. Oh, come on. Okay. So this career test prep, the career test prep is also another really good thing. So any certification that is out there, we have the practice test for it. So you see the military's got the ASVAB on here, all of the, nursing aid, medical assistant, all of the certification tests, the practice ones are in here. So you can go and look at these, and students can practice these if this is something that they're interested in going into. In addition, I do want to go back up here just for your reference. The college test prep also has the GRE and the PSAT as well. So in the college placement. So I did want to mention that as well. And then the school center is another really good thing. So if a student is struggling in a specific area, it's going to have those practice tests and practice so they can go through that learner mode to kind of learn it a little bit better or get more confidence in it before they take a test. It really starts in middle school here. We do have some elementary, but it's very basic. It's math and reading, I believe. So basically from elementary through high school, it's got all of the prep for any subject that they're maybe struggling with. So I find this really, really useful. We do have a financial literacy section. So learning about credit, debt, investing, insurance, that kind of thing. So those resources are in here as well. And then we do have the school finder in here, which is in the training and assessments area. The school finder is where a student can go in and they can search for different colleges or schools that might have the programs that they're interested in. And they can search 2 to 4 years in graduate schools or programs. I always do the quick match because a lot of times we could put in a keyword, but I always just do the quick match real quick because it's 4 questions. And I believe you can skip one. So if the student doesn't know the location of where they want to be, they can skip that question. But the type of school they can click 2 or 4 year. And then they can search up to 5 areas of study. So if they want journalism, it will match their schools with journalism programs. And it'll list all the schools in Ohio. So these are strictly Ohio, obviously, because we're an Ohio website. But when they look at a school, if you look at a school, they can click on the title of the school. They can save these to their backpack if they want to keep researching more schools. I think it's up to 10 they can keep in their backpack, might be 5. But it will give them some information about the school that they're going to. The student body profile, if it's in a small town, if it's a private or a public, it will tell them the costs associated with that school. It will tell them the admissions information, if there is any. The testing area is another thing. If a school requires an SAT or ACT score, this is another good thing for students to know. What the scores typically are for that school. So the 25th percentile students get these scores. In the 75th percentile, they get these scores. So students can kind of see, okay, this is where I fall in, or maybe I would need to work a little bit harder, or different things like that. So this is something that I really like to see. You can compare schools, and everything saves to the profile. So this is a really good tool to just know about and understand, because I do think it helps set those expectations for the students. So that's the assessment and training area, which is one of my favorites, like I said. And then we'll go back to Ohio Meets Jobs. If you haven't, like I said, look at it because it's really, really good. And it keeps everything in the profile. And then here's all the information for all the assessments and training tests that have been taken. Programs I'm interested in the state of Ohio, there's so many programs that are available to students, to adults. And what we try to do is we try to keep that in here so that if someone needs help, or if someone needs to get in, they're interested in, let's see, education and training or career exploration, they can do all of that, and it'll narrow that search down and maybe provide some extra assistance for students, for employers, for, and basically anyone, veterans, anybody. So they can save these programs to their profile. They can find out a little bit more information about the program, and then contact information if they're interested in finding out more. So that's all available, and they can save that to their profile. Going down a little bit further, that's the school finder. So they can save, like I said, they can save up to 5 schools. So, and they can do 5 comparisons. So that's in there, and they can save that in there. This is another scholarship area, is where they can go in and look for scholarships. They can save up to 50 scholarships in this section. They do have to provide a little bit of more information than normal. So they can put in, pretty much whatever. And then I'll put in my zip code here. And then they can put high school freshman, sophomore, senior. We'll put junior. And then hit search. And it'll pull up all of the available scholarships for them and the due dates. So they can save these to their profile as well. And they can kind of keep track, which is kind of nice. So it does take, so if they click on this link, it'll take them to that actual scholarship, which is not on our site. It's on a separate, obviously the scholarship website. But they can add this to their profile, and they can say, hey, I'm interested in it. I applied for it. I won it. I lost it. And that way they can keep track, especially if someone's doing a whole bunch of scholarships. This is really useful because I've heard several times from several different students that they apply for all these scholarships, and then when they win one or they lose one, they kind of can't remember which one that is. So keeping track of this, having a place to keep track of it, I think is really good to have. And like I said, they can save up to 50. And we'll go back to the profile. And I know this is a lot of information very quickly, and I'm very sorry. I'm going to try to get through all of it. So the scholarship, and then the last thing on this side, left side row, is the work values assessment. So the work values assessment is slightly different than the interest assessment. So the work values is kind of talking more about, from most important to least important. There are statements in here like, I make use of my abilities. The job would have good working conditions. I would be treated fairly. I could be busy all the time, or I could try to use my own ideas. I can work alone. So that's kind of going to give them a different view on the occupations that are out there and where they would fall in just in a work environment. And once they submit that, it will come up with these work values. So achievement, working conditions, independence, support, relationships, and recognition. So it kind of rates those based on how they sorted their cards. And then the top two, you can select a level of effort for those. And then, so say they're looking at college and what they're going to be doing in college. So we would say maybe considerable preparation, and then you match to the occupations that are in that achievement as one of the areas that they, kind of is top for that occupation. So the thumbs up in Ohio Means Jobs means it's in demand and growing, which is what we always want to see. For students, though, I do say if they're interested in, this is a really good one, camera operator, television, video, film. I always say, it's not growing in Ohio. So that is something you have to consider, obviously. Or if you go to that, this will take you to that one sheeter again. When you're looking at it, you can go in here and you can see Ohio employment trends. So the yearly projections for this particular industry or occupation is 30 for a year. So when I'm working with students, if that's something that they're diehard want to do, okay, great. But you're going to have to be the best of the best because there are only 30 positions typically in a year in Ohio. So that's kind of how I frame that, because you don't want to take away someone, you don't want to bash someone's dream, but you do have to say, hey, you're going to have to work harder than most people because there aren't very many. If you're staying in Ohio, there are not very many in Ohio. So this is what you're going to have to do. So I think that's just a more realistic way of looking at it. And then also looking at the other related occupations that it matches with as well. So I think this is a really good, another just kind of way to look at occupations for a student when they're trying to figure out what they want to do. Now going down the right hand side, the calendar is up in the corner, so that's kind of up in front so they can see what's happening with it. They will get emails to remind them of due dates. So that's kind of nice to see as well. When students graduate from school, because a lot of times schools will have them put their school email address, they do have to change that so that they can get those reminder emails even once it turns into an adult account. Careers I'm interested in, they can always go through and just keep looking at different occupations based on their matches on the career cluster, on their work values assessment as well, and they can save those if they're interested in them, and that'll take them to those one pagers that you saw. The resume, let's see, do I have a resume on here? You can create up to 5 resumes, and I don't, maybe I do. When you're creating a resume or when you're uploading a resume on Ohio Means Jobs, nope, I don't have any on here, okay. The one good thing about, well, there's several different features on this. It's really kind of nice. So you could create a resume and you just have a title and you can make it active. And when it switches to active, there's a couple things that I like to note when I'm talking to students. This says, I also want Monster employers to find my resume. So we're powered by Ohio or by Monster. So Monster does a lot of the back end work for us. So we have a connection to Monster. So students can actually see job postings for Monster and Monster employers. If you have this checked, they can also see the resumes that are posted on Ohio Means Jobs. If they uncheck this, it will take that off. So especially with students, I encourage it to be taken off just because on Ohio Means Jobs, we vet all of the employers. Staffing agencies have very strict rules about what they can and can't do on Ohio Means Jobs. But with Monster, the staffing agencies that are just recruiting to get resumes on their roster, they will be sending out all kinds of emails to everybody. And so just kind of just take that little load off of students. I have them uncheck that just because you get those recruiting emails that really don't mean anything. They're just trying to get resumes on for their roster. And so students get excited about it. And I just try to kind of protect them a little bit more, keep them in Ohio Means Jobs until they're an adult and they want to get more staffing agencies and stuff like that. So I just encourage you to do that with students. Basically everything else is the same. For students that don't have work experience, they can just check that box and move on. So that's kind of nice. And then once they have the resume posted, I won't go through it because it does take a few minutes to do. I would have them focus on their extracurricular activities and different things like that, volunteer work, when they do create a resume with Ohio Means Jobs. So once they do create that resume, employers can see it and students can see how many employers are looking at that resume. So that will be in this section right here. So active resume views, and they'll be able to see how many employers are looking at their resume. So that's another good indication of, is this a good resume? Do they need more information? Do they need less information, based on what the employers are doing and how many kind of hits they're getting on that resume. Cover letters is the same, just kind of keeping it there for students if they need it. The job search, if you go into, there's a way to save any searches that they create in Ohio Means Jobs. And then when they're searching for a job, they'll see the different filters go through like this. And the filters are kind of nice because you can pick your industry, your location, salary, education level, certificates, occupation, job title. A couple of things to note: we exclude staffing agencies for the most part, but you can't. We don't. I'm sorry, we don't. But you can exclude staffing agencies if you like. This include all other. We filter because we index all of the jobs on Ohio Means Jobs. We tend to leave out things that we can't verify or we think look a little funny. If you want to include them, you can click here and include them. But we try to keep those out, but we do want to give the option. If you want to see just jobs that are posted on Ohio Means Jobs, you can do that as well. And then once you do that, it'll give you a list of everything that you did, and then you can display those results. And this is, I'm sure, just like every other website, but we do give a little bit more detail here. And then you can save the job, report it if it doesn't look right or doesn't look like a valid job posting. You can always do that, or apply for it if there is a link and you're interested in it. So obviously, same as pretty much any other website. We do have, and I think it's in. We used to have, oh yes, here. So if a student is logged into LinkedIn and they have a LinkedIn profile, they can also network to see who else. If they're logged into LinkedIn the same time they're logged into Ohio Means Jobs, they can click this, see who you know on LinkedIn, and it'll pull up anybody that they know that works at that company. So that's a good networking connection that we have on Ohio Means Jobs, which isn't normal for most sites. So we think that's pretty cool as well. And then back to the profile. Like I said, they can save jobs. The practice interview section, if you haven't been to the practice interview section, this again is another one of my favorite things on Ohio Means Jobs. If you go to the practice center, there are so many videos and tutorials and anything that you would need to improve your interviewing skills, really. You could do top 10 questions. You could do a fast track, which is just like videos. What my favorite thing on here is if you go up to practice and you go to the question library. So I like all of these under practice. These are probably my favorite 4, but the question library is probably my favorite on here just because you can search by general, industry, competency, admissions, interviews, government, and veterans. So if you just go to general, you can do entry level or internship or whatever the student is interested in. And it'll take you through the question. It will give you, this is what the employer is looking for. So that kind of narrows it down, because like that whole tell me about yourself, people kind of tend to go a little one way or another on that. So this kind of narrows it down for students and for individuals who haven't interviewed in a while, gives them some focus on what to focus on in their answer. And they'll give them an example answer, which I really like as well. So they can gear their answer based on this answer to kind of fit that STAR method is how this system uses it. So from there, you can build your answer to the question, or you can practice the question. So if you haven't seen this, this is really cool. So what it does is it asks the question.
Thanks for coming in. I have your resume here. Can you walk me through your background?
And let's see if I just allowed the camera. So let's see if this works. And it'll count it down. And then the individual, which apparently is, my camera must be wrong, but it's going to record their answer. Once their answer is done, they hit stop recording, and you can save the answer, or you can re-record your answer. So once you save your answer, obviously this is not going to be a good one, but once you save your answer, you can then email that video to a counselor, to a teacher, to a friend, coworker, whoever. You can send that to anybody and say, how do you think I did on this question? This is the question that was asked. Here's my answer. How do you think I did? So I really think that's a really cool piece of the interview section. Another thing that it does is you can practice interviews, like I said, with those interviewers asking the question. Another thing that it does is it has standard question, like a standard person, so kind of a nice person. So someone who's going to be friendly, who's going to be open with you. And then it goes into challenging, which is a little bit kind of more just doing their job, getting the questions out, that kind of thing. And then you have tough. And the tough one, the interviewer isn't going to be nice, and they're going to ask not nice questions.
Don't you think you're underqualified for this position?
So it's getting the student or interviewee, I guess, that practice to deal with, how do I deal with that situation? What can I say? If you're asked, don't you think you're underqualified for this position? How are you going to respond? I really think that that's helpful, because if you go to those general questions, it's got in here, let's see, it does have a section for uncomfortable questions in the question library, which I think is another good thing to get used to, because those are the questions that you need the most advice for. The other ones kind of help frame things and kind of get your thoughts in order before you go. But the uncomfortable questions are, how do you explain gaps in your resume, and how do you explain being fired, and those kind of things. And I really like this tool for these reasons. I think it's really helpful. So this is actually a really good, all the videos and everything is kept in your profile in this dashboard. So that's kind of nice as well. And I do think for students, it's really nice to do, because when I would have a couple sessions with students and I would have them do, the top 10 questions or entry level questions, you see them uncomfortable with answering the first couple questions because they're looking around to see who's watching them and who's listening to them, but by that fifth or sixth question, they kind of get more comfortable with this whole system and how they're answering the questions, and they feel more comfortable. And I really like that, because I feel like it almost simulates when you go into an actual interview. You're uncomfortable, you don't know what you're doing, So I think that's really helpful for students. So this is, again, one of my favorite resources. And you do have videos, you do have the STAR method. This answer builder is really great for that. You can start building an answer, and you could say, okay, here, I want to start talking, and tell me about yourself. And then it kind of gives you what the question is, why it's important, and then you're answering the STAR method. So who are you? And then this is kind of what you would put in, and then you just put in whatever you want to. And then the next part of it, I don't know if it'll let me move on without putting something in. Yeah, it'll let me continue. And then why are you qualified? And it gives you an example in here. And then why are you here? And I'm just going to say test for all these. And then it pulls it all together so that you're reading one answer. So it's kind of nice to have it all right there for you. So like I said, one of my favorite tools on here. I think this is great. I think this really helps everybody. Anybody needs this kind of help with this kind of thing. So I do love this tool on here. And then you can return to Ohio Meets Jobs by returning where it says return to Ohio Meets Jobs. And then, like I said, it keeps all of your practice videos right in here. And then you can go back to your profile. And then this is that career pathway. You can save up to 5 career pathways. This is, I think I can show you the one that we did earlier where I was adding those occupations. I think this is the one that we did. And I just saved the appraisers, the compliance officers, and different things like that. So this is kind of a nice way to see those different paths. And that's saved in the profile. And then wage pathway is just a tool to kind of get an understanding of how you can get the skills that you need to move forward. You can keep up to 15 documents in Ohio Meets Jobs. So if they have recommendation letters, transcripts, whatever, certifications, they can keep those here. The target salary and lifestyle calculator. Again, I know I'm saying all of these tools are my favorite, but again, these are another couple of my favorites on here. So we have 2 different calculators on Ohio Meets Jobs. Both are really good. It just depends on what you want to do. So the budget calculator, if you have students, especially, I mean, I think both of them are good for students, but this is kind of helpful for when they're living with their parents. And so you're going to say, okay, you could either do it 2 ways. What are your expenses right now as you're living with your parents? And they could say, well, you know, my parents, you know, they pay, we'll say $800 for their house, but the student doesn't pay that housing expense. So they could put a credit in for $800. So they know, okay, my parents pay that much for their house. Don't pay anything. So, you know, then they move on to the next thing. And you can do that with all of these. Maybe they pay for their cell phone and it's $50 a month and they pay for that, but everything else their parents pay for. And I'm just going to put some numbers in here. And I don't know why I did cable, because a lot of times we don't do cable anymore. And then you hit all of these different areas. How much are food expenses? So do the parents pay for all their food every month? Maybe their parents pay, you know, $200 a month for food. The kids don't have to pay that, so they put in that credit. And then they go through this whole thing. Like maybe they have a car and they have to pay that payment. They could put that payment in here and they wouldn't add the credit. And then they go to clothes, and if their parents pay for their clothes, then maybe they put that in there, but maybe they buy stuff every once in a while. So they put in 25 here. And maybe they don't pay for health care. We'll skip that for now. Entertainment, this would be on them. So however much they would like to pay for all of the things that they do outside. Maybe their parents pay for their personal care. And so they would put a credit for here. And then miscellaneous savings, all the same thing. But the really cool thing that it does is it summarizes everything. So this is all the totals, and then this is all the supplemental income. And what this I think is helpful to students to realize is, okay, if we had filled in everything, this number would be a lot higher, right? But you have to make this much money to do all the expenses that we put in there. This is all you have to do right now because of your parents. So I think that's a really cool way to see that and kind of get them to that next step of understanding finances. So the other calculator is a little bit more kid-friendly because it's kind of more pictures and different things like that. So this is a lifestyle calculator. So it goes based on where you live. So if you wanted to pick Akron, all of it's geared towards Akron prices, basically. And so they would say, okay, I live in a I live in a house, you know, and they put that in there and it populates that total up there. And then they go to utilities and they say, yep, you know, we have internet, we have water and gas, we have, you know, electricity, I have a cell phone, and then they put that in there and they just kind of, you just go through, do you eat at home all the time? Do you eat home and fast food, or do you eat at restaurants? And so you just pick one and you keep going through, you know, do you bike to work or to school? Do you take buses? Do you do basic auto? Do you have luxury car? And you just go through all of these different things. And it's a little bit quicker, a little bit easier than actually trying to figure out how much you want to put in the other calculator. So, so they can go through, and this is kind of, you can do with students however you want to do this, if this is going to be how they're living in the future or how they're living now, you know, you can basically have them pick whatever. It's kind of funny to see, you know, what they decide that they want based on, you know, the choices that they pick here. And then if they're going to have 1 child, 2 children, 3 or more, and if they want to save any money. So all of that is in here. And then it comes up with a summary, and it comes up with, hey, this is what you'd have to make based on all your choices. And it gives you a breakdown, and you can view, and this happens on the other one too, you can view jobs that match that. So this is another really good tool. I really think that's kind of eye opener for students, especially because they tend to pick the high priced ones or the, you know, more expensive ones until they get here and they're like, oh, okay, 38. Okay, how am I going to do that? You know, so I think that's really good to see. They can see occupations based on that as well. So there's a lot of really good information on here, and it saves to their profile like before, and it keeps track of everything. So it will tell you right here the target salaries for both, and it keeps track of that. And then the career profile, and I know I'm running out of time, so I'm talking really fast, but the career profile is very, very similar to the career cluster inventory. So if you're working on the adult side, this is the same type of likes and dislikes that, and here I just went, I don't ever pick, I'm not sure on these, but you just go through it again and put in what you like and don't like, and then get the score. And it'll go through conventional, enterprising, social, realistic, investigative, and artistic. And then you can edit your answers, and then you can view occupations that match to that. So, and it will also take you to the career clusters as well. So I know that's a lot of information. I can take questions really quickly.
If you do have a question, you can, raise your hand or unmute yourself. Also, Amy, you may have not been able to see it, but Tanya put a note in there. I think this was while you were showing the interview section. What a great resource that is. And I know that many of us on the Income Education Workforce Development Committee have shared that many times. It's just an amazing resource to practice interviews.
Yes, we really like it. Thank you. And you can always reach out to me. I think Nan has my contact information. So, if you have any questions or think of anything, I know this was a lot of information really quickly, but I just wanted to share this information.
I do have a question, Amy.
Oh.
Sure.
I love that when you do a search, you're able to see who else you might know via LinkedIn. That is an amazing feature. Something we're going to talk about in just a second is that so many jobs folks get because it's based on their network. So I think that's a great feature. Is that something that is only available once you're in as a job seeker? And then it literally thinks about like who you might know based on your own LinkedIn profile? Or is it general enough that if you're at the OMJ website and you're looking at jobs, you still have access to that and you could potentially connect with new folks that maybe aren't part of your LinkedIn profile?
It only works if you're logged into LinkedIn at the same time you're logged into Ohio Miss Jobs, because it
Okay.
pulls from your network, so you can make that connection.
Okay, thank you.
Amy, because you're sharing your screen, you may not be able to see this, but Ryan, and I hope I say your last name right, Ryan, Whithead. I know you're with the Four City Compact. He wanted to know if, and you may have said this, can you create a teacher account? He's previously created a mock student account.
So you can create a teacher account. The teacher account, in my opinion, it's not on Ohio Means Jobs, is not what you're probably looking for. You're probably looking for the administrative tool so that you can see what your students have done. And that is kind of a separate conversation, which I can definitely give you information about. But it's a whole different tool that doesn't look anything like Ohio Means Jobs and doesn't actually go through Ohio Means Jobs, if that makes sense. It's all information that's pulled into a different system where you can see your groups of students and what they've completed.
There is another question in the chat pod for you from Martha Sluka. Does the post-secondary college info still use the College Navigator information?
So I think we pull in, because it's all Ohio schools, and I think the College Navigator is nationwide. So if we use it, I think we only use a portion, we only use the Ohio portion of it. So it doesn't go nationally.
And then Ryan's answer in the chat pod, that was helpful. So Amy, I just want to make sure I understood, when I send out some information after this call, it is all right to send your email address, correct?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? I'm not seeing any raised hands. And you have a thank you from Paul here in the chat box, Amy. And I was going to say, if you don't mind unsharing your screen, and thank you for going ahead and turning off your camera. I hated to interrupt you, but I wanted to let you know that we were getting the audio breaking up. But I think we'd all like to just say thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us today. It really is very helpful.
Sure, anytime.
Oh, well, then we'll definitely keep your email handy. Again, we very sincerely appreciate you making time for us. This is an amazing website. It's always changing, and we really appreciate the refresher.
Of course, anytime. Thank you so much for having me.
So with that, Amy, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you can stay. You're welcome as long as you like, and I will make sure you're copied on anything I send out to everyone. But with that, I wanted to welcome and introduce Michelle Collins. She is Executive Director of Connexus NEO, which works with many organizations, but especially with the employers in our community. And Michelle's going to be sharing a presentation that really has been heard a bit in our community and probably a little bit more employer focused, but I think that it's very important information for us to be aware of, whether we are a school counselor and guiding young people, or we're in the social services group. Knowing this market, because it's a very different one than many of us have seen, is very important. So Michelle, thank you so much for making time for us today. And you also should be able to share your screen.
Do you see my PowerPoint? Great. Well, Nan, thanks for the invitation. I appreciate the opportunity to get the word out in regards to what that we've heard from employers, as well as working age adults or those who are either currently employed or job seekers. So thank you for this opportunity to share it. So again, if you have questions, as Nan mentioned earlier, about utilizing the chat box, please throw those in. I'm more than willing to stop throughout the presentation and answer any questions that you have. And Nan, we can make these slides available to those today, so we can get those out after the meeting as well. So a little bit about this project. I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you to our board of directors who said, you know, the pandemic is, and as Nan already mentioned, what we've seen through this time during the pandemic definitely differs from what we've seen in the workforce space prior to the onset of the pandemic. So our board thought, we've been hearing from employers. We can always hear from more employers, but what if we were able to hear the voices of the working age adults and the job seekers so that we can truly understand what have been their experiences since the onset of this pandemic? What are their new beliefs or attitudes about work since the onset of the pandemic? So really, this work has given us an opportunity, again, to learn more from what employers are experiencing, but also to bring in what the working age adult folks are experiencing. We think this work is really important to get out to you because first and foremost, you are working with individuals who are our future workforce. And so first and foremost, thank you for the work that you do to support and to guide and to direct folks to those almost 13,000 job openings that we have in Summit County. We want to use this time so that you can gain that perspective from those 250 employers. If you're not working directly with employers, we want to be able to share some of those learnings with you. And we know that some of you on the call are employers yourself. And so some of these experiences probably are going to resonate with the same experiences that you've had. And then finally, we want you to be able to learn from the 2,000 adults so that we can think through ways that we can best support them. All right, so this approach was a two-pronged approach. As I mentioned, it was an employer perspective as well as a working age adult perspective. And really, we wanted to understand how the labor shortage was really impacting employers, what have they tried or were willing to try, and really how well do they understand what workers want and need in today's labor market. So what we did is we initially surveyed 250 individuals. I got to tell you that once the word was out that we were looking at doing something in the greater Akron area, there was interest in across Northeast Ohio. So another eight counties became part of this research project, which brought us closer to 800 responses from employers. And quite frankly, what we heard in greater Akron was very similar to what we heard from across the region. So while I share the survey results of the greater Akron region, just know that really this is what employers were experiencing across Northeast Ohio. So from that 250 surveys responses, what we did is that we then brought in employers to really help us deepen what we were learning from the survey. So then we had 77 individuals participate in some roundtables. And so, I mean, ultimately what we learned is that the labor market feels tight because it is tight. So probably no surprise to anyone on the call, but you know, the overarching message really was this. So how are they feeling it? You know, 80% indicated that they're experiencing a talent shortage. What was gravely concerning is that 63% had higher than normal turnover. And when asked if they had a sufficient pool of qualified applicants, 94% said no. So what we want to be mindful of is the qualified piece. So yes, applications were down. We're starting to see employers are getting more applications, but what they were really concerned about is they didn't have access to qualified applicants. They said the hardest to recruit as well as the hardest to retain was this 18 to 30-year-old group, especially for full-time employment. So we asked them, how are you addressing? How does this differ today compared to before the pandemic? And so in regards to recruiting talent, they said they've had to increase their benefits. So, right, thankfully, we saw employers offer more competitive wages. And truth be told, our region was probably lagging in salaries. So it actually just made them more competitive here locally. We saw that they actually were expanding their job descriptions. So maybe where something used to be a required experience, a required skill set, they are maybe making it a preferred in order to reach more applicants who, quite frankly, they were hiring less qualified candidates. What we were really excited about is that they were beginning to partner with new organizations or new training providers. So hopefully you as a educator or you as a workforce program started to see and started to build some new relationship with employers. They started to look differently than they had in the past. What we asked them was, well, what are you doing differently in regards to retaining your existing talent? So truth be told, we don't have 13, 14, 15,000 open positions in Summit County because we have significant economic growth. We'd love to boast that, and that is something we're really proud of as we see employers who are expanding. We see new employers coming to the community, but often job openings are a result of someone has left the team. And so we said, well, what are you doing to retain your talent? And they said, well, we've definitely offered more bonuses. And I think we really saw that in healthcare, hero bonuses. They were promoting more from within their company, and they were supporting individuals or their current employees to gain additional skills. So whether it was they added on tuition benefits or reimbursements, or a lot of employers began to develop in-house training in order to support their existing workers to gain additional skills for new positions within. So, I mean, you know, to wrap up really what we heard employers say, especially during the roundtables, is they realized they had that aha moment that raising wages simply wasn't enough. And so on the right-hand side, you see, all right, it made us more competitive. We're in the game where maybe we weren't in the game by raising wages, but raising wages in and of itself just simply wasn't enough. And they needed to find new ways to be attracted to candidates. And that aha moment especially was when they said, well, wait a second. We need to place greater emphasis on our own company culture, retain our existing employees. And that might mean we may need to have more flexible policies. We need to think more about that hybrid work environment, which was doable in some industries, less doable in other industries, but at least be cognizant that this is what folks want and how do we provide such an environment. So a little bit then about the working age adult perspective. So we were very fortunate to partner with our local workforce development board to fund this project and reaching 2,400 adults within the community. But before I get into what we heard from them, we think it's really important to just level set that we are behind when it comes to the number of individuals in the workforce. And so when we think about, gosh, you know, where are the workers? We just need to know that we have almost 20,000 fewer individuals in the workforce today compared to the onset of the pandemic for various reasons. You know, as an educator, you know, we have shrinking demographics, but the reality is through COVID, we had deaths. Our community continues to experience, but less so, an opiate crisis. We do know the great resignation, great retirement era, whatever you call it, but we saw a definite increase in retirements these past 2 years. You'll see in the data that we saw a lot of individuals leaving the workforce to do gig work, do some type of freelance work. And we know that 1 in 3 in our community stayed home to care for their children. So there's multiple reasons why we were experiencing a labor shortage. So here's what we learned from the working age adults. 1 in 3 workers were laid off. 1 in 4 took a pay cut or had their hours reduced. 1 in 3 started a new job. And as I just mentioned, 1 in 3 needed to stay at home to care for a child or to care for an older relative. So undoubtedly, work was interrupted by the pandemic. But let's debunk the myth that people stayed out of the workforce because they received all these additional benefits. The reality is, if you look over here, 62% of those surveys said that really wasn't the case at all. But what we do need to be mindful of, it was more so the case, those individuals who were in lower paying jobs. What we learned is that, unfortunately, people were quitting jobs without having another job lined up. And so thinking about what are the implications that that has when we have individuals who say, I'm done, I'm out of the workforce. So to hear that 56% of individuals said, I don't have another job lined up. There's significant ramifications to that in regards to, okay, how are those groups going to survive? What's going to be their source of income to get them through that transitional period? What's going on at their place of employment that they would choose to leave the workforce without having another job lined up? What we also learned is that they're really leaving for a few key reasons. And so this kind of definitely relates back to that aha moment that we share with employers, is that they were leaving primarily because poor work environment. Of course, some said they didn't like the job. Some are in transition, quite frankly, their spouse, their partner, they're moving out of the area to take another job. So that impacts their ability to stay employed at their current place of employment. Schedule conflicts. But of the top 5 reasons, pay was not number one. Like oftentimes we think, oh, it's the pay. People leave because of the pay. For them, they said it was really the poor work environment. What we also know, and I just shared this with you a few minutes ago, is that a lot of individuals left the workforce to do gig work. In fact, 1 in 5 were doing gig work. 1 in 5. And I don't know if you experienced this or those that you were serving or students, others were going out and trying, what's this all about? What's it about to make my own schedule, not have a boss? I can avoid schedule conflicts so that I can, ensure I have childcare. We found it really interesting that this number was so high, in that almost 70% had started it since the onset of the pandemic. They really liked it, and they continue to do it, even though I wouldn't say we're past the pandemic, but we're, 2.5, almost 3 years into the pandemic. We also have to acknowledge that today's employees, they're burnt out, overworked. And so what are organizations doing to help individuals deal with mental health, right? So almost 60% said yes, increased stress at work since the onset of the pandemic. 1 in 3 said have too much to do, not enough time to do it. And 1 in 5 are calling in sick due to burnout. So truth be told, if your cameras were on and I asked you to raise your hand, does this feel like any of you? We probably all could admit that one of these is a symptom or something that we experienced since the onset of the pandemic. And what I hate to tell employers, and again, we've shared this message with about 500 employers across Greater Akron, is that unfortunately, people are probably going to keep leaving. Little exercise I do when I present this to employers is I have them count off 1, 2, 1, 2, because almost half are looking for a new job. 1 in 5 say they're actually going to quit their jobs. So we just need to be mindful that, yes, it's a tight labor market. What's 2023 going to bring with a recession? Employers are already thinking about the impact that's going to have on their workforce. But for now, these are the realities. But what we're really excited about that we talk about with employers is that while those who plan to quit are looking for another job, they do think a majority could be convinced to stay in their current position. And so that's why we think it's really important to conduct stay interviews Let's not listen to employees as they're getting ready to exit and think about what could we be doing differently at our places of employment. But let's listen throughout. Let's ask our employees. Let's be open enough. Let's find it important enough to gain worker voice so it informs what can we be doing differently out of our place of employment, because we know 53% said, I could be convinced to stay for the right reasons. So what we do know is that money talks, but it's not everything. Folks indicated, I want meaningful work. I want flexible hours, time off. And so we thought those were really important factors to hit home with local employers when we shared these findings. And also, if you are working with employers, we think it's good advice to say, hey, only 2% of those who responded said, don't really care about having salary information in the posting. And what we've seen since the onset of the pandemic is more employers are putting in the salary or the salary ranges for those positions. And that will help you, those that you're serving, does this make sense for me to apply for this job? But it also helps our employers say, okay, are we getting the abs? Are we not getting the abs? Is it not a competitive pay? And it's helping them to also reflect on the salaries that are being offered with those positions. We also want to, address some concerns about why people aren't looking for work. So when we asked those who weren't employed, are you currently looking for work and why not? Those 20% who weren't employed, of that 2,400, 57% said they weren't currently looking for work. And quite frankly, some very good reasons. Thinking about the pandemic, maybe they had medical conditions that were keeping them out of the workforce. Some, it's a season. They needed to stay at home with their children. And then the reality is that we do have individuals who are disabled and unable to work in those positions that are available within our community. We did find out that those who are looking for work, 50% said looking for full-time, 50% said part-time. And so maybe that's what you're hearing from individuals. And what we've, find really encouraging is when we hear an employer say, I actually had 2 really good candidates, and I wouldn't want to lose either candidate. And then both candidates wanting part-time work. So taking that full-time position and making it 2 part-time positions, and now they have 2 really great employees, and the position works with the schedule that they really wanted. So when we heard that story out in Medina about 6 months ago, we were really excited about the flexibility and thinking about how do you retain, someone who really could be a great asset within your organization. We know that, not everyone's looking to stay in the same industry, but we do know that those who are looking are pretty optimistic that they will find something else. And so, Amy brought up that illustration about utilizing LinkedIn. And we think that's really important to be mindful of, is how do we help those that we serve really build out that network? Because the reality is most individuals are finding jobs through the networks that they have. But the reality is, and I think you probably know this better than anyone, is that a lot of the job applications or doing searches is all online. And individuals, said, well, I may not have access to a computer, or I may not be that comfortable utilizing technology. We also heard that, quite frankly, 43% of individuals said, work's less important to me now than it was before the onset of the pandemic. And so I think we find more and more individuals are trying to figure out, how do we have better work-life balance? They did say that flexibility was really important. So what we did is we disaggregated the data to understand, who's it more important to. So no surprise, it was more important to individuals who had children. maybe no surprise, it was more important to females who tend to be the caregivers of those children. But something we've been sharing with employers is that about 1/3 of employees are working in a hybrid environment. So not full-time in the office, not full-time at home, but 41% would like that to be the case. So where are there opportunities to create more hybrid environments? And then just quickly sharing with you that flexibility is important to many workers. 79% indicated they don't miss working at the office. Employers are going to speak differently to that. And I can share with you that you do miss not being in the office and having that opportunity to collaborate. Stay at job, if it was no longer remote, 41% said if they didn't have that type of flexibility that they would not want to stay at their current job. We also thought it was important, and we heard from community organizations who are serving different populations, help us understand what are the barriers that are keeping individuals from employment. And this is where we see a lot of opportunity for folks like you to work and support individuals. So when we looked at those 2,400s, they expressed, well, it's my criminal backgrounds. So that's why it's really important to get individuals connected to the University of Akron CQE clinic, their reentry clinic. Maybe it's the lack of training. So how do we get individuals connected to Ohio Means Jobs and get connected to what are the training opportunities and the funds and supports within our community and get connected to those local programs that are preparing individuals for the skills that they need to be competitive. They've admitted that they have health issues, childcare issues. There are significant resources in our community. A lot of folks are working together to try to rectify some of these childcare issues. Really excited about Summit County Job and Family Services Next program, which is helping individuals with childcare. And then we also finally asked, because we do think training and education is an important component, do you have the training that you need? And, 1 in 4 actually said, no, I need more. And we asked them, well, are you having difficulty pursuing training? And while a majority said no, some did say yes. And so we wanted to understand why that was. So time, can we do anything about their time? No, but money, there's significant resources within the community, whether it's through the public workforce system or so many post-secondary education providers have excellent funds for upskilling, or there's federal awards and state awards that are available to them. And then we asked, well, how likely is it that you will pursue training over the next 3 years? And more so than not, they said that it was likely or very likely. So emerging things from the job seekers is that, yes, wages matter. Flexibility is what they desire. They really do want meaningful work. Gig work is more so prevalent today than it was prior to the pandemic. The reality is they do need access to mental health services. We're seeing a strong interest in part-time work. We see interest in gaining additional training so they can be competitive for these roles. And again, the reality, COVID did have a significant impact on the way they defined what work was. So if we only shared the findings and we didn't talk about, well, what do we do as a community to address this, then, to just take research and not make it actionable really isn't an option in our community. So as I mentioned, we've been sharing these findings with about 500 employers so that how can they be responsive to what individuals are saying. And we know we can attract talent or we can develop and retain talent. When we look at the talent in our community, talent that is leaving our community is going to Columbus. So that's currently where local folks from Cleveland, Akron tend to go. So we have some work to do to try to retain local talent. And so what we've been saying is, you know, one way to retain your talent, and I mentioned this earlier, is conduct stay interviews. I don't know how many of you are speaking with your team members to really understand, why is it that you work here? When's the last time you thought about quitting? Why is that? I mean, those are some candid conversations that we're having within our organizations, and we're encouraging other employers to do the same. Well, we talked about the importance of having meaningful work. So we really want employers to think about adjusting that workplace culture and providing meaning. And so maybe it's through rewards and recognition. It doesn't hurt to give an attaboy or a kudos and copy supervisors so that they really understand and know the contributions that someone else is making to the work, making it easier on you. Mental health days. I got really excited when one of the organizations we worked with said, hey, we added 2 mental health days last year because we just saw how overwhelming, overtaxing, trying to manage COVID, have a family, have additional responsibilities. And so that's really exciting to see employers be responsive and identify, let's add some mental health days. When we talked earlier with employers, we saw more and more employers were investing in the career development of their employees. So sitting down and writing out a plan. What do you aspire to do in 2, 3, 4 years? What skills are going to be needed? Do you need additional training to reach your career goals? Or maybe it's investing in those who are newly promoted to supervisor positions. So oftentimes we know that folks have really strong technical skills, or they're really good at their existing job, but they haven't been in a leadership role before. And now they're promoted into something that requires some additional skills that they didn't necessarily have beforehand. And so supporting your employees as they progress. Helping employees find meaning in their work. And that's going to go back to this whole concept of worker voice and really listening to what do they value? What is it that they want to do? We thought it was really interesting when a local manufacturer posted pictures of kiddos on school buses around their plant, around the shop. And it was this, oh, we're making parts that go into the school buses, and it's for the safety of those kids. And what we saw was a quality, the quality of the products, less products that had concerns about them that weren't up to quality standards. And so once those shop workers, production workers understood why it was so important that they produce quality parts that go on those school buses, they saw the quality of the products, less errors in the production lines, right? So just making some, showing the relationship of what the work that you're doing internally, the impact it has on those that might be in receipt of the products that you're producing. Just one example from manufacturing. We talked about this earlier in regards to paying competitive wages, but also thinking about are there non-traditional benefits? And that goes back to listening to what our workers want. So if, they care less about a 401k plan, but they wouldn't mind having some additional funds to offset childcare expenses, how can an employer create a flexible cafeteria type of benefits package for their employees? And then we just spoke about the importance of flexibility, where 41% want some type of hybrid environment. So encouraging employers to create this type of environments wherever it's possible, but recognizing it's not possible for every position. And so when you're working with job seekers, and again, it goes back to what Amy was sharing, that, really understanding what's important to them. And if flexibility is really important to them, then perhaps being in healthcare or being in manufacturing, which are two sectors that you need to be at your place of employment, maybe it's not a good fit. And then connecting to the community, we want to make sure that employers are connected to great resources. So if it's our public workforce system, if it's all of the high schools and colleges, again, you are the folks who are building our future workforce, or connecting to other community agencies with workforce programs. We're trying to get the word out as much as possible about the amazing assets we already have in our community. Any questions about what I've shared with you today? And that's okay if you don't. Okay.
Michelle, I'm seeing that Paul has his hand up for a question. Please, Paul, go ahead and unmute.
Actually, I was clapping.
Oh, I'm sorry. Does that mean I need more or less coffee this morning?
Well, again, we can make the presentation available, but we would love the opportunity to spend time with you and your those in your organization to talk through what does this mean specifically to your organization? What does it mean specifically to the students that you're supporting? And how can we ensure that we're creating realistic expectations on both sides of the equation, with the future workforce as well as with the employers? That's something that's really important. And my email will be provided to you as well. And we would just love those opportunities to have those types of conversations. Because again, we can do all the research that we want to do in our community, but if we don't take those findings and we make them actionable within our community, what we always say is we're just going to continue to get the same results. And now more so than ever, we see that additional support is needed for job seekers. We heard from 2,400. And we need to continue to help our employers know just how important it is to listen to job seekers and to revise policies and practices wherever they can.
Michelle, Clara does have a question for you.
Oh, sure.
Yes, I was wondering what kind of response some of the employers have had to the stay interviews that you talked about.
So interestingly, you know, when we asked you to do stay interviews, it has been on rare occasion that anyone has done a stay interview. And so I'm sending some SHRM resources out to more employers than I ever had before. But you know, Clara, I'm not seeing very many who actually do it. I don't know if it's a new concept. I don't know if they're afraid of the responses they may get, but I can tell you, I did it with my organization about 2 or 3 months ago. And those were really important conversations to have, because truth be told, I have an amazing team, but you know, everyone has a bad day. So on Thursday, I asked one employee, when's the last time you thought about quitting? And she said, Tuesday. Okay, we need to unpack that. What happened on Tuesday that made it such a rough day for you? And then we could work through what were some of the challenges and how to address them instead of them just internalizing them. So I'm a huge advocate that we really do need to listen to our employees, and we have to be mindful and set expectations that we may not be able to address everything, but we do think their voices are important.
Thank you.
So if it's helpful for me to send out a link to maybe SHRM's resources, I give you some ideas in regards to questions to ask, I'm more than happy to share that.
That would be great. I also think that it's important to talk to people while they're there before they decide to leave.
For sure. And if you're working with employers, these are things that I hope that you feel empowered to speak with the employers that you're working with. And I think that's really important. We all want to establish strong relationships and build trust with those employers. But we all, if we have the opportunity to speak with employers, these are things that I think it's fair game to understand. Tell me more about your workplace culture. Why would someone want to come work for you? Because I think that's another area that we're really trying to make sure that employers are being mindful about their current work environment. Do you post your wages in your job postings? Are we going to see those there? Because we know that that really can be a factor as to whether or not someone applies or doesn't apply. Ralph?
Hi, Michelle.
Hello.
Thank you. Thank you for that great presentation. And I learned a new phrase that I will be using, stay interview. That's a new one on me. So thank you for that. I'd just like to say, we're here where throughout the pandemic and where the rubber meets the road here in, Akron, folks coming through the door. And, at the beginning, right after the pandemic, so many people either here or outside of here would like to often say, oh, it's just because people are getting all these benefits. That's why you can't find people.
Mhm.
And my response to that has been, I've been out there, no, it's a lot of things. And thank you for listing. You listed a lot of the things that I have often listed, such as daycare, huge issue. So really helpful information. I just wanted to give you my 2 cents.
Thanks, Ralph. Well, if no other questions, I'm going to send it back to Nan.
Michelle, I actually did have another question. Certainly, stay interview is kind of new terminology, but I think historically a number of employers might have worked with their team members on development plans, each year as you had your performance review, then you talk about what are your goals next year, what are you aspiring to do. Can you help me with the difference between those and maybe some things that you heard during the research because there is a little bit of difference, but I'm not sure I'm completely clear.
Yeah, so one example we saw as we were trying to understand what that means is we looked at some work that was done up in Michigan to when a new employee is hired. How do we create a 3, 5, 7-year plan from the onset of that new employee and develop a plan with them? If we can come in with a new employee and have a sense of the direction that they want to go, then we can develop a plan each and every year. And of course, those annual reviews, which I think are what you're referring to, can inform that. But not only is that, building out a plan for the employee who has career aspirations, but it also, from an employer's perspective, demonstrates the investment that you want to make in employees. And every employee wants to know that they're valued. That's something we heard, right? So you want to know that you're valued. And so you start to see that from the onset, from the very beginning, that you're working with an employer that really wants to invest and develop you.
So what did you hear anything on the other side? There are sometimes team members, they're very satisfied with where they're at. When you try to talk with them about development plans, they're like, nope, I'm good. I don't need anything. I wondered if you got any, nuggets of wisdom. Again, many of us are employers, but we're also working with employers, whether we're a counselor or we're helping folks that are entering the workforce be aware of the questions that might be good for them to ask. So, I just wondered if you got any nuggets there that might be of help to us.
I don't know if this is a nugget, but I think it was one of those, the reality is that we need workers in all types of positions. And so if you are comfortable at this position and there's a demand for this position, then how do you continue to feel supported and it's satisfying through maybe it's meaningful work? There's value in that. Nan, to your point, not everyone is looking to grow up a career ladder, and that's okay, because we have a demand for, well, someone says, well, being an STNA, why is Connexus has made significant effort with several of you on the call to get more individuals into STNA roles. And sometimes they say, but a nursing assistant, low paying job, but we have folks that love being a nursing assistant. And we have a huge demand, especially since the onset of the pandemic, for nursing assistants. So while we want to encourage growth, we also know that there's a demand, and we have folks who really like those types of roles. Right. So I think that's, I think, Nan, that really comes from that building the relationship and the one-on-one communication with that individual to see what is it you value, what is it that you aspire, and finding ways to be supportive based on where they want to go. But I also know that so many of you have so much information that you're also able to show them career paths they never even knew existed. And so that's the beauty of the educators and workforce providers on this call, is that you can meet them where they are, but hopefully you also have the tools, and we saw those through OMJ, to be thinking about what are all the other options that they just maybe don't even know about. Anything else? I don't think so. Well, again, I really appreciate your time today. And hopefully there is some kind of nugget that you're taking away to say, yeah, that was insightful. Didn't know a lot about that. I learned something new. Thank you, Ralph, for raising your hand and say, hey, I learned something new there. And again, any opportunity that we can work with you or work with your employers to think about, how do we make this actionable? We'd be more than happy to do so.
Michelle, thank you again for joining us. Thank you for being willing to share the presentation. I'll look for that so I can forward it out to folks. It, of course, includes your contact information. I know you are very responsive to all of us in the community and working with us. And thank you so much for making time to share this.
Thank you.
And I will let you pull down your screen while you're doing that. If you couldn't see it in the chat pod, a couple kudos on the great presentation. And Paul has a good comment that a lot of times on the job coaches, whether we as agencies are helping with that, or, even mentors within organizations can be sort of that on the job coach to help that new team member fit in and make a difference. So again, if you're more on the side of supporting a job seeker, I would be urging that job seeker to ask some of those questions in the interview too. So we have just a couple more minutes, and I think I maybe didn't introduce myself well at the beginning. I'm Nan McClenigan. My day job is with Goodwill Industries, but it's also been my privilege to be part of the Social Services Advisory Board for a number of years, and it sponsors the committee, Income, Education, and Workforce Development, that hosts this event. And as Ralph said, we all hope to return to a face-to-face event someday, because that allowed us, especially the social services agencies, to have tables and share with the counselors material, things that are available in our community. And we hope to do that again someday. And, one of the things that we've developed over the years, I was just going to quickly share my screen and show you that, and we gave you a link to this when you got your invitation. We have, over the years, with the support of many in the community, created a Map Your Career Guide. Now, there are certain pieces of this that are, there's the components that are available in Ohio Means Jobs that Amy shared with us this morning. But it's just a different way to take a look at some of the different careers that are available in our community. And if you did not go to that link and pull it down, I urge you to do so. And I just wanted to remind people that this is actually most useful as a digital tool, because that PDF has those links that you can click on and spiral out. Ohio Means Jobs is right at the top, not a big surprise because of the breadth of that that resource, Clara and her colleagues at the Akron Summit Public Library and so on. So we have a lot of different things there, but it does focus, and again, it reiterates in a different way some of the things that Amy was sharing about thinking about your career, knowing yourself, explore those options, build yourself a profile and a plan. And this not only works for students, but it can work for someone that's maybe changing careers or thinking about a different type of career as they go forward. And it does focus on the high demand jobs in our community, like healthcare and so on. And I want to give a special shout out to Michelle from Connexus. She and her colleagues helped us with the current data on wages and number of employees in that area. And then my colleague Laura Walker here at Goodwill put it back into this PDF. So I just wanted to call your attention to that. I will certainly send that link again, along with all the there was great information in the chat pod. Megan Greathouse from Metro gave a link. Ralph gave us the information on how to reach him at OMJ Center. Paul introduced himself, Paul Magnus. So we have some things that I'll put in there. But the other thing that I will also send a link to for our counselors, and even for those of us in the community as agencies, I'm just going to send you a link to the 211 system. It is an invaluable resource in our community. They have worked very, very hard to make it much more easy to navigate. And many times, in addition to maybe working with a job seeker or an employer, we're also helping them with something with their family. And we all love to be able to share information and link people to something that would be of help to them. So I just want to remind everyone that the 211 system is very robust and can often be at least a starting point for that person or for us to guide them. So that would be another link that I would put in. And with that, I'm going to just stop for a moment, see if there's any questions that maybe were in the chat pod that I missed, or any questions that someone has that we haven't addressed. Friday morning crickets, but I know that we're all busy and we're all probably multitasking. So what I will do is I'll leave this open for a while, just in case someone still has a question for me. But I know sometimes people need a certificate of attendance for this particular event. So when I send out the email with the resource information, then you can email me back if you need a certificate. I'll just show you that we do kind of have that ready to go to fill in. So if you were here today with us, we'll be pretty close to that 2 hours of contact. But if you need that for something, I'm glad to provide it to you. So again, just email me back and ask for the certificate, and I'll be glad to do that for you. Ralph, any last words of wisdom or items that you wanted to bring to folks' attention?
I don't know about wisdom, but I will, just one thing I'd like to add is this is still the best job seeker market. You can tell by the color of the hair on my beard. I've been doing this for a while. This is the best job seeker market I've ever seen. It's still, and that's what allows for some of this negotiation and flexibility. And I think it'll stick going into the future. It's another one of those positive things that came out of the pandemic. Virtual meetings and stuff, and some tools for job seekers to be able to negotiate. And if you have some kind of background, you can get your foot in the door now. So, and I don't see it ending. We'll see what our recruitment sessions look like in the next year, but we still don't get very many job seekers. I think part of it is because they can go out and get a job. So those are my last 2 cents. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Ralph, again, for your leadership, and the contact information will go out. I want to thank everyone for their time, for their great questions, their attention. And I would just tell you, tentatively mark your calendars for the first Friday in December of 2023. That historically has been a really good day for us all to get together. So tentatively mark your calendar for that first Friday in December of 2023. I'll add that date for us to pencil it in when I send the message out. And with that, thank you all for your time. I hope everyone has a very healthy, restful weekend. I'll stay on the call for a few minutes in case anyone has any questions or things I can help them with. But that, be well, everyone. Have a fabulous day and a fabulous weekend.
Thank you, Nan. Thanks for your leadership.
Thank you, Nan, and everyone have a happy holiday season.
Thank you, Paul.